Hey everyone, welcome back. We're doing a deep dive today into common English mistakes.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, and we've got this really cool source that approaches it from the perspective of someone learning English as a second language.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of a neat way to think about it because even if you are a native English speaker, I think we can all agree we make mistakes sometimes.
Absolutely.
So why don't we just jump right into it?
Let's do it.
Okay, so one of the first things that the source mentions that can be a real struggle for English language learners is mixing up he and she. And they even have this funny little tip in here where they say, to imagine Tom Cruise for he and Beyonce for she.
Yeah, I like that.
Do you think that would actually help?
I think that using really strong visuals like that can definitely help.
Yeah.
Because I think our brains are wired for those kinds of connections.
Yeah.
But, you know, ultimately the key is to really practice identifying the gender before you speak, rather than trying to catch yourself mid-sentence.
Yeah, that's true, because once you've already caught yourself mid-sentence, you're already kind of flustered at that point.
Exactly.
Okay, now this next one, the source points out, I think is another really common one.
Okay.
And that is misusing a and n.
Yeah.
Now, this is one where we have to remember it's about that initial sound of the word.
Right.
Not necessarily just the letter that a word starts with.
Exactly.
So, for example, we say an hour.
Right.
Even though hour starts with an H, because it sounds like it starts with a vowel.
Right.
You know, the source even jokes about how no one would ever say a apple.
Right.
Because it just sounds wrong.
It sounds wrong.
So your ear really is a powerful tool.
Yeah, it is.
When it comes to language.
Absolutely.
All right. This next one always makes me cringe a little bit when I hear it.
Oh, okay.
And that is, I am agree. I feel like I hear that one quite a bit.
You do?
Even from people who have been speaking English for a while.
Yeah, it's a common one.
So what is the correct way to say that?
The correct way is just, I agree.
I agree.
And I think what happens is that a lot of times people are bringing in rules from other languages.
Oh, interesting.
Where you might need that helping verb. But in English, agree can stand alone.
Okay, so it's almost like they're carrying over a rule from another language.
Exactly.
Into English, and it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about something that I think trips up a lot of people.
Okay.
And that is prepositions.
Yeah.
The source really focuses on in, on, and at.
Okay.
Which I think we all know can be notoriously tricky.
Yeah, very tricky.
And they have this visual breakdown that they do where they say that in is basically like being inside a box.
Okay.
On is being on a surface, and at is like pointing to a very specific spot.
Right.
So do you find that that kind of visual approach is helpful when you're thinking about prepositions?
I think it's incredibly helpful.
Yeah.
Especially for things like prepositions that deal with spatial concepts.
Right.
You know, it can really solidify the meaning.
Yeah.
And I think you can even take it a step further and really try to visualize those things in your mind.
Okay.
So, you know, when you use in, think about being surrounded by the car.
Oh, yeah.
Or when you think about on, think about the bus as kind of this big flat surface.
Oh, that's a good one.
That you're on top of.
Okay, yeah. Those are great additions.
Yeah.
All right. The next thing the source brings up is the very common mistake of using double negatives.
Yeah.
So, for example, I don't know nothing. Now, why do you think this mistake is so common?
I think it probably has to do with the fact that people are over-applying a rule. You know, we know the past tense of go is went.
Right.
So we instinctively want to use it.
Yeah.
But with that helping verb did, we always use the base form of the main verb.
So did already covers the past tense.
Okay.
So it should be I didn't go. Okay. All right. Shifting gears a little bit. The source mentions that overusing the word very is something that a lot of advanced learners tend to do. Yeah. They actually suggest that instead of just constantly using the word very, to try to swap it out for a stronger vocabulary word.
Yes.
So why is that so important?
Well, I think that using very all the time makes your writing or your speech sound very repetitive and kind of weak.
Okay.
So instead of very tired, you could say exhausted.
Yeah.
Instead of very happy, you could say thrilled.
Oh, I like that one.
So just expanding that vocabulary will make your English sound much more sophisticated.
I can definitely see that. Using more descriptive words really elevates your writing and makes it sound more interesting.
Yes.
All right, now let's tackle a pair of words that I think a lot of people get confused about.
Okay.
And that is since and for.
Yeah.
What is the key difference between those two words and how do we use them correctly?
The key difference is that since refers to a specific point in time.
Okay.
And for refers to a duration of time.
Oh, okay.
So you could say, I've been living here since 2010.
Yeah.
But I've lived here for 10 years.
Okay, that's a really good explanation.
Yeah.
So since kind of pinpoints that starting point, and then for lets us know how long something has been going on.
Right.
Okay. Now, another mistake that I have noticed people make, and this is one that I've even noticed native English speakers get wrong sometimes, is mixing up less and fewer.
Right.
Why is that one so tricky?
This one comes down to the difference between countable and uncountable nouns.
Okay.
So fewer is used for things that you can count individually.
Okay.
Like apples or dollars.
Right.
And less is for things that you can't count individually.
Gotcha.
Like water or time.
So you would say fewer cookies, but less milk.
Exactly.
But you know what I have noticed sometimes?
What's that, Deuce?
Is that I've seen signs, like at the grocery store, checkout.
Right.
That say 10 items or less.
Right.
Which it seems to go against the rule, doesn't it?
It does. That's an interesting exception.
Yeah.
Technically, it should be 10 items or fewer.
Right.
But in this case, less has become pretty widely accepted.
Yeah, I guess that's just one of those quirks of the English language.
Exactly.
All right, let's wrap up this first part of our deep dive with one final distinction the source makes.
Okay.
And that is between fun and funny.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like sometimes people use these interchangeably.
They do?
But there is a slight difference.
There is.
Between them. So can you kind of explain what that is?
Yeah, so fun is something that's enjoyable.
Okay.
It's a very broad term. It can be lots of different kinds of experiences.
Uh-huh.
Whereas funny specifically refers to something that makes you laugh.
Okay, so going to a party could be fun.
Right.
But a joke would be funny. Okay, so recognizing that distinction can really help you.
Yeah.
Choose the right word.
Choose the right word.
To get your meaning across.
Right.
Oh my goodness, we've covered so much already. We went from basic pronoun usage to the nuances of fun versus funny. It's amazing how much these seemingly small mistakes can impact how we communicate. We'll be right back in just a moment to continue our deep dive into these common English errors.
Sounds good. It's amazing how language is always kind of evolving, isn't it?
Yeah.
What might be a mistake in one context might be totally acceptable.
Right.
Or even like a deliberate choice.
Yeah.
In a different context.
Yeah, that's a great point. And it actually reminds me of what we were talking about earlier.
Okay.
With those double negatives.
Yeah.
Like grammatically they're incorrect in standard English, but the source did point out that sometimes they are used intentionally for emphasis.
Right.
Or even in certain dialects.
Yeah, exactly. Like if someone says, I ain't got no time for that.
Yeah. Grammatically it's incorrect, but it conveys a much stronger sense of urgency than if you just said, I don't have time for that.
Yeah, it definitely adds a certain flavor and even a bit of personality to the language.
It does. And it really highlights how language is about so much more.
Right.
Than just rules.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
about conveying meaning. It's about connecting with people.
Right.
In a way that resonates.
Absolutely. And I think that also ties into how important the context is that language is being used in.
Exactly.
Something that might be perfectly acceptable to say in a casual conversation.
Right.
You probably wouldn't want to say in a formal setting.
Exactly. Knowing your audience and adjusting your language accordingly is so crucial.
Yeah.
It's about being adaptable and sensitive to those nuances of communication.
Okay, let's shift gears just a little bit and talk about something that often trips up even advanced English learners.
Okay.
And that is the difference between since and for.
Now, the source emphasizes that since is used for a specific point in time, while for is used for a duration.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to consider how those two concepts, like a point in time versus a duration, how those kind of extend beyond just since and for.
Yeah.
And they play a role in so many other aspects of English grammar.
Absolutely.
Could you give me an example of that?
Sure. Think about how we use different tenses.
Oh, yeah.
To express actions that happen in the past. Are happening now or will happen in the future.
Right.
Those tenses are all related to time. Just like since and for.
Yeah.
Even adverbs like yesterday, currently, or tomorrow.
Yeah.
Help us pinpoint specific points in time or durations.
That's a really interesting way to think about it. It shows how interconnected all these different elements of grammar are.
They really are.
So it's not just about memorizing rules, it's about understanding those bigger concepts.
It's about understanding the why behind those rules.
Exactly. Now, getting back to since and for, I did want to add just a little nuance.
Okay.
You know, while since is often used for a specific point in the past,
Right.
it can also be used for an action that started in the past,
Okay.
but is continuing in the present.
Yeah.
So, for example, I've been working since 8 a.m. would indicate that that action of working
Right.
started at 8 in the morning, but is still ongoing.
It's still going on, exactly.
So it's not just like a past event. It's like a continuing thing.
Right.
Okay. Now, another pair of words that I've noticed that people often mix up, even native speakers,
Okay.
is less and fewer.
Right.
What is the key to really mastering those two?
The rule is based around the idea of countable versus uncountable nouns.
Okay.
So fewer is for things that we can count individually,
Right.
like cars or books or mistakes.
Okay.
And less is for things that we can't count individually, like traffic,
Oh, okay.
information, or stress.
Okay, so it's basically about whether you can make the noun plural or not.
Exactly.
So fewer cookies, but less sugar.
Right.
But I have noticed people say things like 10 items or less,
Right.
you know, at the grocery store checkout.
Yeah.
And that seems to go against the rule.
It does. That's one of those cases where, despite the rule, common usage has kind of shifted.
Yeah.
And less before a countable quantity like items has become widely accepted.
So it's one of those exceptions that proves the rule.
Exactly. And it shows you how language is constantly changing and adapting to how people use it.
Yeah, it's a living, breathing thing.
It is.
All right, let's wrap up this segment with one final distinction that the source makes
Okay.
between fun and funny.
Okay.
Now, it's easy to think of these as kind of interchangeable,
Right.
but there is a subtle but important difference between the two.
Right. Fun is this really broad term that just encompasses any enjoyable experience,
Right.
whether it involves laughter or not.
Okay.
Going to a concert,
Yeah.
playing a game, having a challenging workout.
Uh-huh.
All of those things can be fun.
So fun is really about that overall enjoyment of an experience. But funny is specifically something that makes you laugh.
Exactly. A joke, a witty comment, a slapstick routine, those would be funny.
Okay, so funny is about humor,
Yes.
but fun is much broader.
Much broader.
It can be anything that's enjoyable.
Right.
And using those words correctly really ensures that we're communicating our intended meaning.
Yes. And the more precise we are with our language, the more effectively we can express ourselves.
Well said. You know, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
And I'm sure at this point you are starting to see
Uh-huh.
those common English mistakes in a whole new light.
I hope so. I think it's really easy to overlook those things.
Right.
When you're just speaking or writing quickly.
But hopefully you're also starting to appreciate
Yes.
the richness and complexity
Absolutely.
of the English language.
There's a lot to learn.
There is. We'll be right back with some final thoughts and maybe even a little challenge for you. All right, we're back for the final part of our deep dive today into common English mistakes. I don't know about you, but I'm already starting to pay a lot more attention to the way I use language.
Yeah, me too.
It's amazing how much we can learn just by being more mindful, I think.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's like we've been sharpening our linguistic tools.
Yeah, exactly.
And the more we use them, the better we get at it.
Exactly. You know, as we've been discussing all these common errors, it's kind of made me wonder about what other subtle mistakes we might be making
Right.
without even realizing it.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think each of us probably has our blind spots when it comes to language.
Sure.
Maybe it's a particular word we misuse or a grammar rule that we just always forget.
Oh, yeah. I know I have a couple of those. Like, I always have to double check myself when I'm using affect or effect.
Right. Yeah.
I can never remember which one to use.
Yeah, that's a classic one.
Yeah, and it really just highlights the importance of staying curious about language, I think.
Yeah.
And to keep learning. It's all about that exploration.
Absolutely.
And really, that's what this whole deep dive is all about. It's not about reaching some unattainable level of perfection or anything. It's more about just embracing that journey of learning and growing, I think.
It's all about progress, not perfection.
Exactly. And remember, even the most experienced writers and speakers make mistakes.
Oh, for sure.
All the time. So the key is to just approach language with a sense of humility, I think.
Yeah.
And always be willing to learn from those mistakes.
Absolutely.
So to kind of wrap up this episode today, we have a little bit of a challenge for you.
And I like it.
Take some time to reflect on your own language habits.
Okay.
Are there any words or phrases that you tend to misuse? Any grammar rules that trip you up?
Good questions.
Once you've kind of pinpointed what some of those blind spots are, maybe make a conscious effort to just pay more attention to them in your everyday communication. Maybe even jot down a few notes or look up some examples. But just remember, this isn't about beating yourself up.
Yeah.
It's more about recognizing those areas where you can grow and improve.
It's about celebrating the fact that there's always more to learn.
Exactly. And ultimately embracing the beauty and complexity of the English language and using it to really express yourself in the most powerful and authentic way you can.
Well said. So until next time, keep exploring.
Yeah.
Keep questioning.
Yes.
And keep striving to become the best communicator that you can be.
And don't be afraid to make a few mistakes along the way.
Mistakes help us learn.
They really do.
Oh.
Until next time, happy diving.